Welcome to episode 84 of MAV Sports Take, your weekly sports talk diving into the business side of the sports world. Unmuzzled sports talk from Ryan Roberts at Rise and Draft, and of course, the David Turner, 18-year scouting vet across the NFL, CFL, including 3 straight Overland League championships with the Arizona Rattlers. You can follow him at MAV_sports. We are live here on TikTok, on Twitter, and on YouTube, bringing you live. We're very interactive, so if you want to drop any live questions as we discuss a few of the conversation points tonight, we please welcome it. Of course, the NFL draft is now in the books, the 2022 NFL draft, so we're going to talk favorite draft, least favorite draft, and then we're going to take it a little more to a wide scope, David. We're going to talk about the offseason. So we're going to talk about our best constructed offseason. Each of us are going to have a pick, by the way. Worst constructed offseason. And we're going to throw a wild card in there. Maybe a team that we're not completely sold on, we're not completely turned off by, but we're cautiously optimistic. We're not going to jump full way in, but maybe they could surprise some people. And then the last topic of tonight, we got to talk about NIL gone wrong. There's some headlines today that I'm going to get into, and I will say this. Me and David have talked about this a lot, kind of the inner workings, the layers of NIL, and I think that we're both in favor of many parts of it. What I saw today is trending towards a very troubling area in the NIL world, including the transfer portals also included into that conversation. So we're going to go head first into this. Of course, before we get into our first topic of the night, I have to ask my esteemed co-host, who, man, how many hats this man has worn. His resume is that of a god, basically. David Turner, how are you tonight, sir?
I don't know about that, but thanks for stroking the ego. I'm doing good. It's been, it was a long weekend. Obviously, you and I both put in a lot of hours over the weekend, watching the draft, digesting it, putting out content. I know you've done a bunch of hits. I'm going to be doing more hits this week on it. So I think it's just been great, but it's what we live for. So as personnel guys, this is the weekend that we really live and it builds up to. So that being said, I'm tired, but I'm good. I'm really excited for this show tonight. I love talking, and I love how we're going to talk draft. Obviously, we're going to hit on it, but it's also roster construction because that's what I'm all about. I like building the entire team. So Let's look at free agency. Let's look at the overall roster now. Let's see what it all looks like and, give out a few grades. Like right now, I talked to one of my friends on one of the teams after the draft, and they're like, well, we'll know in 2 to 3 years on how it worked. And I'm like, no, man, like you guys this tonight, this was after the draft. I said, you guys here tonight gave the coaches every opportunity to win come, the fall. So, you can't say that it's you guys didn't do everything. Like they really built a good team in the offseason. They had a good draft. And then, that they're turning over the club now really to the coaches to coach up everybody and start getting everybody on the same pages with the offseason workouts leading into training camp and all that. So it's really an exciting time. I know for me, when I was with teams, I always loved this time to, get the guys there for rookie mini camp, see the offseason, do a mini camp and everything, and then really see what we had going. And if there was any holes, sometimes there's some June releases that you can get some holes filled and then go from there. But I mean, you pretty much sealed the deal and the team is the team now. So it's exciting.
Yeah, it really is. And I think one of my favorite things about tonight's discussion is we have these superlatives, and me and David started talking just a little bit about it, just so we kind of have an understanding of where we're potentially going to go with some of these topics. And me and David disagree a lot on this, which I think is fun, David. Honestly, I put something similar.
The children always love when the parents bicker.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hey, I put something on Twitter the other day, and I truly believe this. A healthy discussion and discourse is good when you're having a deep conversation about it is great. And as long as there is valid points on both sides and a person presents their way, I think that makes people think. And that's good content to me, things that are thought-provoking, right? And I think that we're both obviously going to put 2 different sides of arguments in certain situations. But what I hope people get out of it is that fact that there's not one way of looking at something, for one. And for 2, as long as you present something and you have a good basis for understanding, then, thought-provoking, right? Like that's what good content does. So we're going to dive into it. Before we do, here at Maverick Sports Consulting, we would like to ask you to follow, subscribe, and take the chance to interact with us on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and other social media platforms. We are a company that is all about helping maximize your opportunities in front of you and your career. The only way we could support you is if we hear from you. Your takeaway from tonight's show should be that if you interact with us, we will find a way to help you in your career path. Reach out and we could do a Mavs episode on your topic, or we could circle back with you to help you with some individual attention. Don't wait. Reach out today at Mav_sports on all social media platforms. All right, David. So we are going to get into some draft specific topics. Excuse me. We're going to start with our favorite draft. David, I did like a quick grading out, gave like A's, B's, C's, even gave a couple D's, to be honest, on a couple of these drafts. But there were a lot of B's and higher for me this year, man. Like, I thought there were a lot of really good drafts, honestly, this year. And it makes sense because I've highlighted this before. Last year's draft had about 650 players that were draft eligible. This one had over 2,100. So there was depth, man. There was a lot of good football players in this draft. Not the top-heavy group, but a lot of good football players in this year's class. So, David, I'm going to let you start. Who was your favorite draft that we just saw this past weekend?
Man, like I was telling you before we went on air, it's hard. There are some good drafts. I mean, again, I thought both New York teams did good. I like Baltimore. I like the Bills. I thought that Denver had a solid draft. I thought, so many of these teams did a really, really good job. It's hard to just say, one is the top rung, top go-getter. But, for me, and I know what you're going to say here, but it's true. I really liked what the New York Giants did, especially up top with, getting my favorite pass rusher after they passed up Micah Parsons last year. Like I was preaching to go get Micah. They said, nope. And they passed on him. They go get, Thibodeau this year. I like Neal. I think Neal's going to be a really solid right tackle for him. Waddell Robinson, to me, is a really exciting, fun player to watch. I loved him at Kentucky. Very versatile player. And then they start to address the offensive line here with North Carolina's Josh Ezekdu. And then they go and take, LSU's corner, Flott in the third round. And then they're not even done. They have two more picks in the fourth round where they get a tight end. And they go from San Diego State, Daniel Bellinger, and then Dane Belton out of Iowa. I think just that alone in the top 4 rounds, I mean, that is a solid draft. And they weren't even done yet. They got another guard from North Carolina again. They got a D tackle out at Arizona State down here. And then they rounded out with a pretty athletic linebacker from Cincinnati and Beavers. So, for them having 6 rounds of draft picks, they utilized them, I think, to the best of their ability. The only thing I would have probably liked to see is maybe them take another offensive lineman in here. I think they could have done without the D tackle in the 5th round and maybe taken another offensive lineman there just because they do need more help and depth there at that position. But that being said, the rest of these picks, I think, fit their philosophy defensively, offensively, fit their scheme. I thought they stayed and they knew who they were. They stayed within whom they are because now you're coming in with pass rushers like Thibodeau and Ojulari, to mix in with Leonard Williams, right? And then they got weapons on offense with obviously the receivers that are already there and now adding Robinson to be, another gadget player to go in there and play a little bit. And again, offensive line needed to be addressed. They addressed it with 3 different offensive linemen in this draft, all from big schools, 2 from North Carolina, 1 from Alabama. And that's the other thing I liked about this draft. You don't see a lot of small school kids. These are all big school kids that they are like, okay, we're going to increase competition in day-to-day practice. So here we go. I really enjoyed watching what they did this year.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot. So, first of all, for the Giants, there was a lot that I liked. I mean, like you mentioned, I don't think they could have done any better than getting Thibodeau and Evan Neal with those 2 first-round picks. Like, it was smacking him in the face that both these guys slid to that respective spot, and they took the best player. And I applaud that. Fantastic, really. Is it Schoen is the new general manager? Is that how you pronounce his last name? Or is it Shane? Sean. Okay, all right, yeah. You got him then. You'll pronounce that one. Usually I correct you, but yeah. So you got both at the top. I thought was fantastic. You mentioned Joshua Ozudu from North Carolina. I actually like him a lot. Some people were like third round pick. I'm like, no, good player, man. Like I like him a ton. So I was happy with that pick. You mentioned Darian Beavers in the 6th round. I thought that was a steal. I thought he was going to be like a 4th rounder, somewhere in that ballpark, like early day 3 type of kid. I'm like, cool. But I really think that they missed a little bit in like that 2nd and 3rd round, man. Like that's where it just stalled it a little bit for me. Still a good draft, in my opinion. But like I like Wan'Dale Robinson in a vacuum. But the fact that you just drafted Kadarius Toney to be like kind of the same thing last year, I feel like that's just like butting heads of styles. Like I didn't love that one. And then the Cordell Flott kid from LSU. I mean, quite honestly, there was just better corners on the board. I mean, that's just flat out what it is, you know. So that's just my quick like pushback on a couple of the picks. I'm nitpicking because I think that they really got the top of the draft really well, and I think that they got guys like Ozudu a little further down. And I mean, Darian Beavers I thought was a really nice pick at that point in the 6th round. So there were a lot of good with the New York Giants. There was just a couple of those that maybe they made them like a top. They were still like a top 5 to 6 group for me when I did my final rankings, but like just that's why they're not number 1 on my list. If that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. I just like I said, I could have went with Jets. I could have went with Buffalo. I could have went
Jets was good, yeah.
Different picks, Baltimore, whatever. You know, like there are some good drafts. Denver. So like to me, we're talking 1A, 1B. You know what I mean? Like they're really close in the grading. But when you can come out of a draft with, in my opinion, probably the best pass rusher and the best tackle, like ready to polish to play right now, tackle, and the spot he's going to play is right tackle, and that sews up your line. You got Thomas and Neal now at tackle. I mean, it reminds me of what the Niners did years ago when they had 3 first rounders. Remember, they had Brown, Staley, and Upalati.
Opati, yeah.
Opati. Mike Iupati all on the line, and then they were solid for like 4 years. Like they were running the ball, they were doing great. So when I saw that, I was like, this is what we need to finally have bookends to protect Daniel Jones here. No one's saying he's a franchise. I still like the kid. I think he's been under fire for far too long, and he's like on his 4th offensive coordinator. It's so hard to succeed without stability. So again, I like it. And Robinson, like you said, they drafted Toney last year. There were some rumblings they were going to get rid of Toney. I think Robinson and Toney together really gives defenses fits because the speed with those 2 guys, their wiggle ability, either one can catch the bubble screen and go. So I don't want to take too much more time on this, but I like. And then when we watch Daboll's offense up in Buffalo develop, he likes multiple guys that can go take the shot downfield from multiple positions. Look at the AFC Championship game where their 3rd receiver or 4th receiver, Davis, scored 5 touchdowns. You know what I mean? So it's just a situation where I was like, that gives him another weapon to play with.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned the New York Jets. I felt really bad not picking them in this spot because they deserve mention, man. Like I really thought Joe Douglas did a fantastic job, to be honest. I mean, the first round could not have gone much better. Like I thought it was a little high for Sauce Gardner at 4, but either way, you got Sauce, you got the defensive end Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State, and then you got Garrett Wilson, the wide receiver. Like that is just a fantastic 3 first round picks.
My favorite corner, my favorite receiver, and probably my 3rd favorite pass rusher. They all
at 26, too. Yeah,
at 26, crazy. And then in the 2nd round, they go get Bryce Hall to pair with
Breece Hall. They already have Breece Hall. Yeah.
To pair with the guy they got last year. So I thought that was fantastic. I'm not a big high guy on this tight end from Ohio State. Not my favorite.
Me neither. Yeah.
And then their 6th and their 4th, their 3rd round pick. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of his, and their 4th round picks. They're okay. I like them. They're okay. I just thought, again, the Giants nudged them out, but Garrett Wilson's my favorite receiver in this draft. Receiver in this draft. So, and Sauce being long, how he is, I'm all excited.
He's long.
Yeah.
He is long. You know what my favorite thing about the Jets right now is they're gonna have a Brees and a Bryce Hall on the no relation, by the way. So they're gonna have at least 3 letters on their back for their first name. And Dave, they also have a Michael Carter, the running back, and a Michael Carter, the cornerback, too. So they love their double names, man, at there. So want to mention them, but they were not my top draft. They were not. I went with Baltimore Ravens, which you mentioned very briefly. Dave, when I look at these picks, this is just such a Ravens draft to me, right? Like, this is like Ozzie Newsome, as it always is, except now it's Eric DeCosta. Like, that, honestly, like, let's look down this and let's just look at the value. Kyle Hamilton, who we had both going top 10 in our mock draft that we did before the draft.
If Neal wasn't there, I was texting you. I think the Giants would take him up there at 7. I thought Kyle Hamilton was going to be a Giant, you know, but Neal fell to him and they had to take Neal, you know.
Yeah, no, and I think so. You get a value with Kyle Hamilton. We thought that he was going to be a top 10 pick. He goes to 14. Great fit. And Baltimore has had a history of really understanding how to utilize defenders. So I think that they're really going to utilize him second level, third level, in the slot. I think they're going to do a lot of things with Kyle Hamilton at 6'4", 220, which is just a crazy size for a safety. Then they get Tyler Linderbaum, David, at 25. I think for some schemes, and he's a center, so he's never going to go top 10, but I think for some schemes, wide zone systems specifically, they probably would have valued him somewhere 10 to 15, honestly. Like, that's this type of kid, in my opinion. So I think you got value there with a really good athlete. And then I think you got tremendous value in the second round because David Ojabo is going to have a redshirt year, the pass rusher for Michigan. But if he did not get injured, and I know there's a big if, and like, what does he look like coming back? And I get that conversation. But if he did not get injured, he's probably going top 20 in this draft, and you get him at pick 45. So I think that's a tremendous value. Travis Jones dominated the Senior Bowl. I thought he was a second-round pick all day, maybe late first. The defensive tackle out of UConn goes there at pick 76. I think he could start a nose tackle early for the Baltimore Ravens. And they traditionally, whether you're talking Haloti Ngata, whether you're talking Brandon Williams, back in the day, talking Sam Adams and Tony Saragusa, like, they have always loved that style of player. So I think that is a tremendous fit. So each of those players I thought was a value at their spot. And then they get Daniel Falele, who in the 4th round, the 6'8", 384-pound offensive tackle who needs some development, but the Ravens have shown that they can work with those guys. Remember Orlando Brown Jr. that came out of Oklahoma a few years ago? Wasn't the most quick-footed guy of all time, but they have a system where if you're powerful and you understand how to attack leverage, like, they can work with you, right? So I love his fit there. And then after that, I mean, they're taking gambles on traits. Jalen Armour Davis is a kid that struggled with injuries at Alabama, but he's a 4'3" athlete. It's 6'1", has length at the cornerback position. Charlie Kohler had a fantastic pro day at 6'6", 252 pounds. I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I mean, he has traits to work with. Isaiah Likely is a tight end that I really like. And then one of my favorite picks in this draft, David, their last pick, 6th round, 196. They got the SEC Player of the Year at running back this past year, Tyler Beatty, who's a little bit of a smaller back, but he ran for over 1,600 yards and had another 50-plus catches, man. I feel like he's going to just come into this offense, and he's going to be a really nice third down back for them, working with J.K. Dobbins coming back from the injury. So in nearly every spot outside of the punter, probably, right, I thought that they had value at every single spot. So this one for me was a Ravens draft. Like, this was it. It was Ozzie Newsome. Now it's Eric DeCosta.
Again, I ranked them up there, but I'll say this. With all the injuries they had problems with last year at cornerback and at running back, I thought they would have went for younger corners and made them earlier and often. Okay, now Hamilton was a steal, like you said. Tyler, great value where he's at. David, great value where he's at. Jones, great value. But the reality is the running back position and the corner position really hindered this team last year. Then on draft night, they traded Hollywood Brown, to the Cardinals. So they don't have him there. And even the
but they fleeced the Cardinals. A first-round pick for Marquise Brown.
Well, I'm just saying that, you know, when it comes to that, you know, you think, okay, they're going to trade him away and get another receiver or somebody with that pick in order to help the quarterback out. And even the quarterback, you know, he tweeted out, WTF, like, what? Like, you just traded my only weapon away and we didn't really do much in free agency to help that. And Now, what are we going to get? What are we going to do? And then the cornerback, the first one they take in the 4th round has injury history. Now, like you said, if he stays healthy, you're solid. But you just had so much injury in your secondary. Like, you're playing with the 6th and 7th corner at some games. You know what I mean? I mean, it was just ridiculous. And the guy you draft has injury history. So those little tweaks to me is why I had to bump them down in my draft versus go. But like you said, the first 2 rounds, 3 rounds, first 3 rounds, great value. I just would have prioritized other positions to meet the needs of this team for roster construction.
It's fair. It's fair. I mean, at that spot, like at specific spots, though, I just felt like the value was too much. And like you said, there was definitely some injuries, obviously, but you're getting J.K. Dobbins back. You're getting Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey back at corner. I understand that there's always a possibility that they might get re-injured at some point, but there's also a possibility that maybe they stay healthy, right? So I'm just going to wait and see a little bit. I get my biggest thing was I would have liked them to get a wide receiver at some point in this draft. I agree with you on that. They drafted Rashad Bateman last year in the 1st round. Hopefully he takes the sophomore jump that I think that he can if he's, used properly. They got a couple other guys that they've drafted and they hope that they've been developing. So we'll see. I mean, either way, I think I think the Baltimore Ravens understand that they need to play a specific way. So getting their running back, J.K. Dobbins, back, continuing to beef up that offensive line with Linderbaum and Falele, a part of the group that they already have, getting the 2 tight ends, because we've seen when Baltimore's at their best, they're running 2 tight end sets all day, 2 and 3 tight end sets. So we'll see what happens. But either way, I just really thought, David, that they just hit tremendous value at a lot of different spots. So let's go the opposite end of the spectrum. I can start first if you would like me to.
Yes, go for
your
it.
least favorite draft, David. I am going to go to the NFC East. I am going to go to the Washington Commanders now, okay? So originally they had the 11th overall pick. They traded back. At that point, they drafted Jahan Dotson, wide receiver out of Penn State, with the 16th overall pick. And I think that's where the tragedy starts, to be honest. I like Jahan Dotson. I like him. I had a 2nd round grade on him. I like Jahan Dotson. I really do. 16 is just way too high. And especially when you're looking at it in at 11, you could have had Kyle Hamilton or you could have had Jamison Williams if you wanted to go wide receiver. And their trade back, like they didn't get a ton out of that trade back. So like, I don't know. That move just didn't do much for me because I think that you drop back 5 spots for minimal return and you got a much worse wide receiver, in my opinion. Like if they would have just taken Jamison Williams there, I would have been like, cool, you're good to go now, man. You got speed. I like Dotson again. And I know he's only going to go in there and he's only going to be asked to be a secondary pass catcher because they already have Terry McLaurin. I get that. But still at 16, I would have rather maybe go in a different direction there and then wide receiver maybe in the 2nd round, depending on who kind of fell into that situation. So that's where it started with me. And then after that, honestly, at that point, I was just kind of like, okay, I can get over that because I do like Jahan Dotson in a vacuum. I do. Just a little high. But then they go with the 47th overall pick and they take Fedarian Mathis from Alabama. And I was shaking my head, David, literally shaking my head. He's a solid player. Solid. Like if I got him in the 4th, I'd be like, cool. Top 50 player. Nah, man. Nah, he's just not a gifted enough athlete, man. Like he's going to hold the point of attack. He's going to do a solid job in that regard. He's got good hands, but he's just not a difference maker in top 50. Like I'm just not taking that guy. You could have taken, this is my biggest quarrel. You could have taken Travis Jones there, who's a better player in my opinion. He didn't go to 76. And you could have taken a better player in my estimation at the same exact position. So did not like that one. And then it got even worse for me, David, in the 3rd round. Brian Robinson Jr. from Alabama. One, I think that's just too high for Brian Robinson Jr. Let's start there. Number 2, why is that your priority? A running back in the 3rd round? You already have Antonio Gibson, who's a good running back. Why is the 3rd round the spot that you need? And you also got a running back that's kind of Antonio Gibson's faster and he's a little more dynamic than Brian Robinson. But either way, they're both like high volume carriers. Like that's how they're going to be effective. So I didn't like that, man. I really didn't. I just looked at it and I was just kind of shaking my head. And then they go to the 4th round. They take Percy Butler, who was a great special teamer, David. Great special teamer. But in this class that I already said at over 2,100 players, was the fourth round where you had to get that just pure special team guy? Is that where you need to get it? I think that's too high, man. I just think it's too high. They got Sam Howell in the fifth. I like that pick because in the fifth round, if the quarterback hits, awesome. If he doesn't, whatever. Who gives a shit, right? So I'm like, whoa. I like that pick. That was my favorite pick. And then they get Cole Turner in the fifth round too, the tight end out of Nevada that we've had on the show before. And I like Cole. I'm like, fifth round? That's fine, man. That's cool. Chris Paul, the guard from Tulsa, was a massive hit in the seventh round, in my opinion. I could not believe he was still there in the seventh round. I thought he was going to be a early day 3 type of player. So like that was awesome. So there's some redeeming qualities to this team, but that redeeming quality didn't start till the fifth round, man. I think they missed on those first four rounds. I thought they just missed. So I was not a fan of the Commanders at all. Just was not.
Yeah, I disagree. This is one of the ones we disagree. And this is one where, I agree with what you stated, though. If you knew you were going receiver and you knew you wanted a impact receiver, then staying at 11 and taking Jameson Williams should have been your spot. That should have been your spot. Take the guy got to you, a player that if he wasn't injured probably would have went far above that, right? But you're sitting at 11 and he's there. You might as well pull the trigger, take your guy. He's injured. You're going to have to wait for him a little bit. But like you said, they already got Gibson. Adding Williams with Gibson would have been a really incredible matchup. I love Dotson. I think Dotson's going to be a great player. I don't fault him at all for doing that. But like you said, value-wise, to trade back and get a step down receiver from Jameson Williams makes a very little sense there. So I agree with you on that note. Yep. I like the Robinson pick because I don't think this is a team that's looking to invest a lot of money into Gibson going forward. I think it's going to be, or not Gibson, the running back. What's
Gibson.
His name? It is Gibson. Going forward. So I think they drafted a guy that, a year from now could possibly take over for him and give him that, like you said, the same style type of player. I like the Howell pick and I like the Turner pick. I think when I've worked with these guys down in Carolina, they like the big schools. They like SEC players. You saw that come through. They went after players that fit their scheme and their system. Is it my favorite? No, they weren't out of my mouth when we were talking about favorites, right? But was it a consistent one? Yes, I think it was a consistent draft for them, and it held true to who they were as draft people and stuff. It wasn't one that I hated as much as you, but again, I think that they thought these were the players that they were gonna need to win next year in their division. And like I said, I can't fault them for some of those picks. I like them. So
I hear you, man. You know what I think it's consistent with, Will? Because I agree. It's consistent. It's consistent to be blah. It's just going to be it's not like they're going to go 7-10 now next year. Like they're just going to be the most blah team of all time. They're going to win some games. They're going to lose more than they win. And Ron Rivera is going to have his, 10th losing season in the last 13 years or something like that, like as a head coach. So yeah, I don't know. It's just blah to me, especially in that division, man. Like I just felt like there should be more urgency because that division's not great still. Like it's not. The Cowboys have flaws. The Eagles have flaws. The Giants have flaws. Everybody has flaws in that division. And yet there's just because I almost called the Redskins. The Commanders have talent. Like there's talent on the defense. For whatever reason, they didn't play well last year. You bring in Carson Wentz. I don't think it's going to work out because he's got a fractured confidence, right? And it's just not whatever. But either way, you still have Terry McLaurin at receiver, who's a stud. You got Antonio Gibson, who's a good player. There's still talent in that room, right? Like there's still talent on that team. And I just feel like they're just going to be consistently blah at this point. So, all right, David, let's move on here, though. We don't want to kill these drafts too bad. Actually, no, you didn't tell me yours yet, right? So let me hear yours.
I didn't tell you mine yet.
Yeah, your worst.
My worst, honestly, my worst. It's funny that you mentioned the NFC East because I'm pulling from there as well, but I'm pulling Big D.
Oh, good one.
I did not like what Dallas did.
I hated their draft. Go ahead.
They might have had one player, maybe two that I liked, but the rest of them were just average. Like you want to talk about blah. non-impactful. Like last year, I love what they did with Micah Parsons. Obviously, he was all world and he's going to pay off for him for a long time. But in the first round at the 24th pick to take Tyler Smith out of Tulsa, like that offensive lineman,
who I had a day 2 grade on. I like him, but 24 is way too high. Just
way
absolutely
too high for him.
Yep.
At that point, there were other players they could have taken that would have impacted their team on their roster, but they go and take Tyler Smith and out of Tulsa. Like I watched Tulsa 2 different games this year, and he did not jump off the tape at me. He wasn't like, "Ooh, who's this guy?" I didn't see a guy who was a huge finisher. I didn't see a guy who was a great balance guy. You know, I didn't see a Mala or a Bruiser. So for me, I was like, a Mala or a Bruiser. But you know, I just couldn't get behind that pick. And then, like you and I text a little bit, Sam Williams, a lot of off the field concerns, a lot of lingering things over him. And again, they take him in the second round at the 24th, the 56th pick overall. And I'm like, to me, Sam, with what was lingering and everything that's on him, should have been a 4th round pick, because there's a lot of chances this kid could mess up, could screw up in the future if the things that are being said aren't true, and he makes it through this one. Yeah, there's still a lot of character concerns there. And then to go into the 3rd round and then address receiver with Jalen Tolbert, like I'm like, you're in the 3rd round and you're taking a South Alabama guy that to me is just a guy. He's not special. Like I like him in the 4th, 5th round, maybe probably closer to the 5th is where I think I graded him. But I mean, in the 3rd round. So now I got 3 stretches here. Jake Ferguson, I like Jake Ferguson.
Solid.
I think 4th round is a solid pick for him.
Yeah.
But then we go back to offensive line in the 5th round, going to North Dakota, not even North Dakota State, North Dakota.
Oh, I kind of that was my favorite pick of their draft, though. I like Let's Go there in the 5th, but yeah.
I think Waletzko should have been a 6th round pick. Again, you're at 155, so you could, again, or grade up. But at that point, again, you haven't addressed any of your other needs. Your receiver was, your pass rushers, a character risk. The first round pick is and then you go to Fresno State in the 5th round for another corner who's a decent corner. Again, being here on the West Coast, I watched him.
He's a talent. He's talented.
He's a
talented
kid.
Talented.
He's got some shots. But last year, I think they drafted 3 corners last year, all over 6'1". And it's like, why are we going and loading up with more corners when you need other help on this team? Like, again, taking Clark, the LSU linebacker, in the 5th, I thought was solid. Again, I liked him. I liked Ridgeway in the 5th. That was good to me.
I like Ridgeway. Yep.
And Harper, to me, was a good pick, a solid pick in the 6th. But I would have liked them to see them address linebacker a little bit higher. Safety, to me, probably should have been addressed in this draft. I think that also, we didn't see enough receiver priority. So I would have personally at the 24th pick in this year's draft, I think you could have went with a different player. Obviously, around that pick area, you still had receivers on the board that went in the 2nd round that you could have actually taken there, or taken a linebacker. Again, linebackers were flying off the board right around there. So, you could have had Devin Lloyd out of Utah at that position, and that would him and Micah Parsons together would have been an incredible twosome, in my opinion.
I think at 24, like, again, I like Tyler Smith. I would have taken him in the 2nd or 3rd round, and I would have been very happy with a developmental offensive tackle. But
they had Jermaine Johnson was still on the board at 24.
Who was Jermaine Johnson?
Jermaine Johnson.
Yeah.
The Florida State pass rusher was still on the board. Imagine pairing Micah Parsons and Jermaine Johnson or Devin Lloyd.
And DeMarcus Lawrence, too, still a defensive end from the Cowboys as well. So, yeah. Now, I mean, I'm not arguing with you. My point was that I was getting to was, if Tyler Smith is the best option you have at 24, I think you need to find a trade back. Like, I think that's just all it comes down to. Like, trade back. If that's your guy, take him in the 2nd round. I'm good with that. But, like, 24 is just a little high for Tyler. And I like Tyler. Again, I think he's got developmental potential. Like, I really do. I think he's got talent. But was not a fan of the pick in the vacuum. I agree with you. I just want to go off on a quick tangent real quick, David, and then we'll get going here because I know we're a little behind probably the time that we want it to be at. Man, the Sam Williams thing, the second round, I just want to voice my distaste for that for a second. He had a charge of sexual battery and assault. And then I was also told, this is behind the scenes stuff a little bit for people out there if you're listening, that he went to the NFLPA Bowl. And I heard that he was very difficult to have a conversation with and coach. So, standards, man. All I'm asking for is standards. That's all. Am I saying the kid shouldn't have a chance at all? I'm not saying that. And I don't know all the facts to the conversation. I'm just saying that past is checkered. It's very checkered. In the second rounds, to just kind of look past it all, just hurts my head a little bit.
Well, yeah, but in another, I agree with you. Like I said, I'm not a fan of that pick where he was or anything.
Yep.
But look at some of these receivers in the second round, like Minchie, and you had Robinson, and up top you had talk about the most head scratching trade back I've seen in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Minnesota trades back the 34th pick to the Green Bay Packers in order for them to come up and get Christian Watson, to put a weapon on the field for the Green Bay Packers, your divisional rival, and you trade back with them to give them that weapon.
Minnesota.
I'm not trying to go off on a tangent here, but that was like the biggest head scratch move back that I saw where divisional. It happened twice. I can't remember the second divisional one that happened, but this one, to give that offense a weapon, that was like hurting for a weapon, to give them this kid there at the 34th pick in the second round and move back with your division to do it. I was baffled by that move back.
I'll tell you the second time it happened, David. It was also Minnesota who traded back from 12 to get to 32 with the Detroit Lions. And that was one of the worst trade backs I've ever seen. You went back 20 spots in the first round and you got a third round pick. That's what they got out of it. 20 spots back and they recouped a third round pick. 20 spots in the first round and you got a third round pick. I understand this was not the year to demand.
I don't care what kind of modern day mathematics that you're looking for, but a third round pick doesn't equate for 20 trips back.
In the first round, absolutely not. Yeah, man. That was like one of those where I was just like, seriously, that's what they got for that? It was, oh God. It honestly gave me a little bit of the goosebumps, man. Because I'm like, seriously, that's what you got for that? That's crazy. All right, Dave, we're going to move into more of an off-season overview. I definitely want to get to our NIL discussion, though. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to do a best constructed offense, off-season, worst constructed off-season. We're going to do a wild card. Me and David are each going to present the picks that we have. Maybe we just won't have as much back and forth just to kind of present it and try to get through it as quickly as we can. Before we do, Maverick Sports Consulting was created to help professionals in the sports community to showcase their passion in a professional manner, whether that is to help you when approaching an interview, create a social media marketing plan, or helping you prepare to take a Wonderlic test. We are here to help you maximize your opportunity. Please head over to mavericksportsconsulting.com. Come find your advantage package today. All right, David. So we're going to go best constructed offseason. Do you want to start here or do you want me to start? I will let you pick.
I'll go first. We didn't do our wild cards on the draft, but I think we talked enough about who we liked and didn't like. So I think you.
Well, no, I wanted to do the wild cards for the off season.
So you did. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes,
my bad.
You're good. Yep.
So my favorite off season is the Denver Broncos. Like getting Russell Wilson and putting him on this offense with Cortland Sutton, Tim Patrick, Jerry Jeudy. I can't pronounce the tight end's name, as you know.
Nobody can. Nobody can.
Albert, okay. And then they have Williams, and they were able to sign Gordon back. They, I think it was just phenomenal. I'm not a huge Randy Gregory guy, but I definitely think he filled a need for them, and putting him in the mix for them makes a lot of sense. Obviously, their secondary is pretty stout and good, and they're young. They fly around. They hit people. And then when you go into their draft and what they did in the draft, again, this is a team that didn't pick until the second round, the 32nd pick overall, and they got a edge guy, a pass rusher out of Oklahoma who I liked a lot, Benito. And then I think they got the best tight end in Greg Dolch at UCLA, picked a solid corner out of Pittsburgh, Iowa State D tackle who moves great. I think they added more depth on their defense there. You look at the safety help they got, picking the Sanford kid, a wide receiver in the 5th round, another really solid pick. So again, for what I saw them go through and construct in free agency and then move into the draft and then add to it, to me was a really solid. This is a team that in the NFC or AFC West is announcing they're here to win. And you know what? Hats off to George Payton and the crew, because I constructed a really, really good team.
Yeah, they they got Russell Wilson, right? So at the end of the day, what do you really need to say about it? So this one's going to be a weird one for you, David. I know you're going to disagree with this one imminently. Good thing that we're running out of time, so you can't disagree with me. That's fantastic to hear. I like a lot of, and I know I mentioned this before the show started, I like a lot of what the Kansas City Chiefs have done this offseason. I really do, man. I really do. They traded Tyreek Hill, who is a great football player. There's no doubt. But I personally just would not pay a wide receiver $30 million a year. Just wouldn't do it. And I understand that they are now going to be constructed a little bit differently. But I think when you have a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes at the helm, I think that you have an opportunity to do it differently. And I was on record. I've been saying the weeks leading up to the draft after that trade was happening that I don't think it's necessary that you have to draft a wide receiver in the first round. They ended up taking a good one in the 50s with Sky Moore out of Western Michigan, who I like a ton, and he's going to play this year. But I didn't think that they had to do it with one of those first-round picks. Instead, I thought you needed to help needs, right? And their needs are cornerback, pass rusher. That's like their biggest thing. Their defense is not great. You get Trent McDuffie. I know we have a difference of opinion on Trent McDuffie, but I think Trent McDuffie has a really solid floor. I think he's going to come and he's going to be a starting cornerback for that team early on in his career. George Karlaftis, who you know I'm a big fan of, at pick 30 out of Purdue, I thought was just a tremendous value. One of the best value picks in the first round. And I think when you look into this defense now, you drafted a guy like Leo Chenal there in the third rounds. You're going to get a guy now that can mix in at Mike. You're going to let Nick Bolton, who was fantastic as a rookie, play more in probably the will spot. And you're going to let Willie Gay Jr., who's another athletic linebacker, be able to work a little more in space. And then you look at George Karlaftis mixing in with a guy like Frank Clark, who's a good player when he's got his head on straight. And you got Chris Jones up front. I think the secondary is going to be better. And I think that your offensive line is fantastic. You got Orlando Brown at left tackle. You got your right tackle, Lucas Niang, who's a solid football player. You also got Darian Kennard, who I thought was a top 100 type of offensive lineman out of Kentucky. You got him in the 5th round somehow. So you got another value there. Trey Smith was fantastic as a rookie. Creed Humphrey was also fantastic as a rookie. You got Joe Thuney now at guard. I think that this team's going to be a good team like they always are, but I really liked their offseason. I really did. So, David, let's pivot.
Well,
no, you can't disagree. You can't.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm going to add.
No context.
I'm going to add.
Oh, you're going to add. All right, go ahead.
Vontez Scanling. I love that. I love that pickup for them, and I love Juju Schultzer. I think those two receivers added value to this team to the point where they could trade Tyreek Hill. Like you said, their offense is going to run a little different, but having Juju Schultzer, Smith-Schuster, and
Schuster,
whatever their names are, the hyphenated boys, having both of them with Moore and Powell, and if Gordon can work his way back in, that's going to be a pretty good receiver room. They're not getting enough credit for it just yet. And like you said, with Mahomes delivering the ball to him, it should up their game.
Yeah. All right. So now we're going to go to the worst constructed offseason. We're going to buzz through these quick. Like I said, my pick, David, and I'll let you go second. Jacksonville Jaguars is mine, man. Look, Doug Peterson is obviously going to be a huge upgrade over Urban Meyer, but I just didn't like this draft. I didn't like the draft that much, David, and I didn't like this offseason more than anything, okay? The draft, I think, was solid. It had some redeeming qualities, but you gave Christian Kirk from Arizona this massive money to be this wide receiver that I just don't think he is. Zay Jones, he's going to start at wide receiver. I don't think he did enough at the wide receiver position in general to help your second-year quarterback, Trevor Lawrence. Offensive line-wise, they talked themselves out of maybe drafting an offensive tackle early on in this draft because they franchised Cam Robinson at left tackle, who's not good, and then ended up giving him a 3-year extension to make him one of the highest-paid offensive I think the 7th highest-paid offensive tackle in football, and he's a below-average starting offensive tackle. So now your offensive line is Cam Robinson, Ben Bartch, who's not good at this point. You're probably going to have a rookie center in Luke Fortner. You're going to have a really good guard in Brandon Scherf. There's no question. But then you're going to have a struggling right tackle in Jawan Taylor as well. So that means 4 out of your 5 offensive linemen are big question marks. And even Scherf, who's a really good player, all-pro candidate, is entering his first year on the team. So even he's going to have a little bit of a transitional thing, right?
But he's coming off injury too, so
exactly.
You know what I mean?
So he's a really good player, but there's going to be a transition, and then the players around him just are not going to be great this year, in my opinion. You have 2 running backs, James Robinson, who is injured now, and you got Travis Etienne that's coming back from injury. And that defense, David, I like Devin Lloyd there in the back end of the first round. I thought that was a great pick. I have heard today. And I maybe love your comment on this because that defense is just bad. I can go all over bad. Travon Walker, David. Okay. Travon Walker was the first overall pick. You know where they're planning to play him?
No.
Stand up outside linebacker in a 3-4.
Why?
That's what they said today. That's what their plan.
But he's if they wanted that, they should have taken Thibodeau.
Thibodeau, right. Right.
Thibodeau would fit that perfectly. That's what he's going to play the Giants.
Yep. So a guy that at Georgia played in a 3-man front and played more where I think that he could actually be very good at. He played like a 5-4-4-I type of player.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead, they're playing him as a stand-up rusher, which means you're going to force that kid into space a lot. It's going to happen.
And that's going to hurt he's not that athlete. He's not that athlete.
Now, he's a great explosive forward athlete. He's not a guy that's going to change direction in space. Like, that's just not what he's going to do. So I hate a lot of what they did this year. I don't think that they helped Trevor Lawrence, their biggest asset on this team, enough. And I think they're mismanaging their players already, like just based upon what they're saying. So not a fan of the Jaguars. David, who was the team that you thought was the worst constructed offseason?
I got to go with one of my least favorite teams and organizations at the moment. How about them Texans? So you go and you trade.
Wow, we both picked AFC South teams. That's funny. Go ahead.
Yeah, I noticed that. And but you go and you trade one of the most explosively young quarterbacks in the league right now after you sat him all year, in Deshaun Watson, right? And then you do nothing in free agency or via trade to address the quarterback position, and you're going to roll with Davis Mills, who I don't dislike. Don't get me wrong. I like Davis Mills, but Deshaun Watson is a potential Pro Bowl, consistent Pro Bowl, all-pro selection each and every year. And now you have a huge gaping hole there in comparison to Deshaun Watson, comparing him to Davis Mills. And they did nothing in the draft. They did nothing in free agency. They're just rolling with Davis Mills, which to me is not an aggressive style of play. And then even further, they did very little in the draft to build an explosive offense. I love Minchie. I think John Minchie is an incredibly talented receiver, but he's hurt. You're probably not going to have him a bunch this year. And if you do, you're going to have to limit his reps a little bit just to make sure you manage his off season and getting him ready, which will put him behind the 8 ball. So you're looking at game 6 or 7 before he's really hitting and moving forward, in my opinion. The offensive line is average at best for this team. Running back wise, just to get Marlon Mack, and then run with Rex Burkhead, like that's not a formidable team in this division that you're looking at, that has Jonathan Taylor and, Henry and runners that, are going to go downhill and play heavy run style offenses. I just don't see it with this team and their construction. And then you go over to the defense, and I mean, Derek Stingley at the 3rd overall pick with injury history. I like the kid.
Big question mark.
The kid. I think if he was healthy, I still wouldn't have taken him at 3. I don't take corners that high. I mean, unless they're Deion Sanders, I just don't do it. And them taking them at number 3 when this team had so many needs. They could have they could have drafted Neal, plugged him in on offensive line opposite of Tunsil. They could have went and got a pass rusher to put on this team. They're sitting at 3. They have a lot of options, and they pull a trigger on somebody that's an injury history corner that even if healthy, I still don't feel I would have valued him at the 3rd pick in this year's draft with those people that are sitting there. So I don't understand what they're building for. I don't get in the offseason. Again, they got decent amount of picks for Deshaun Watson, but they didn't do much in free agency that wowed me or made me all excited about what they're going to do in the future and building around anything. I don't get their philosophy. I don't understand their construction. And I'm worried about I like Lovie Smith as a person. I really like him as a person. Let me go there. I really like Lovie as a person. I really like Lovie as a coach. But I worry that Lovie is on the teetering of a one and done, and they're just going to try to do something else next year. And this was a stopgap, hold place season, which again doesn't make much sense to me. Why you fire one coach just to hire another coach to have a stop place, hold on one season type situation again? Why not keep the other coach in place? Lovie was still on the staff. You know what I mean? Like it just reeks of a lot of inconsistency down there in Houston. So we got to get on to other topic, but that's what I have to say about Houston.
Nah, man. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the coaching situation there at the end. I have a soft spot in my heart for Lovie Smith because he was a defensive coordinator for the Rams when they were really good, the greatest show on turf. Quietly, man, no one talked about that team in 99-2000 season for the defensive side of the football because everyone just talked about Marshall Faulk and Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holton. I get it. But the Rams had the number 1 defense that year, and Lovie Smith was the reason why. So I always have a soft spot in my heart. But to be very honest, like you can't go from being what he was at the University of Illinois over the last few years into another head coaching job in the NFL. Like I just did not like that hire just in general. And it's not all his fault. It's just a bad franchise right now. So, David, let's go to our last topic before we talk a little NIL. We're probably not going to have as much time. Maybe we'll do a more expansive take on it next week. But I want to talk about a wild card offseason. So this one's one where we're cautiously optimistic. Maybe we're not throwing our flag fully in, but we like a lot of what they did. I'll start here. I'm going to go with the New York Jets, which is weird for me, man. It's weird that I like what the New York Jets did, not only from a draft perspective. I mean, we talked about that, right? Like you get a number 1 receiver in Garrett Wilson to combine with Elijah Moore, who's got a lot of talent. They drafted in the 2nd round last year. You get a guy like Ahmad Gardner that I think I really like Bryce Hall at corner. And now getting a guy like Ahmad Gardner, Bryce Hall is going to turn from a okay
call him Sauce. Let's go.
I don't want to call him Sauce. His name's Ahmad. It's on his birth certificate. Anyway, Bryce Hall, who I like at corner, he just went from an okay number 1 corner
to a guy named Sauce, and he's going to the New York Jets. I mean, come on, it's Sauce.
It's Sauce. He's actually not.
It's not gravy. It's Sauce.
All right. Anyway, I think you obviously improved your cornerback group there. There's no doubt about it. Jermaine Johnson is David, the last edge rusher. I asked you this trivia. Remember last week? John Abraham.
Yeah.
John Abraham, last edge on this team, defensive end, not interior rusher, to have 10 plus sacks in a season. So hopefully Jermaine Johnson can reverse that quickly. But I think that the secondary got a lot better. I think that Jermaine Johnson's a big upgrade for a defensive line that's pretty good, man. If Carl Lawson stays healthy at defensive end, he's a good football player. Quinnen Williams is a really good, young, ascending defensive tackle. Sheldon Rankins has been a good player as well. You got a guy like John Franklin Myers, who I think is going to be a fantastic, like inside-outside type of flexibility on the defensive line. You got Bryce Hall now to combine with Michael Carter from North Carolina, who was in last year's draft at running back. I think is a really nice fit. We both know that we're neither a fan of Zach Wilson, but they have certainly put a lot of talent around him now. Like there is better receivers than there were last year, better running backs. Offensive line's going to be pretty good. You got Mekhi Becton, who's hopefully going to be able to stay healthy and kind of put everything together there. The third-year offensive tackle out of Louisville was a first-round pick a few years ago. Laken Tomlinson comes over from San Francisco, one of the better guards in the NFL. Elijah Vera Tucker, who they took in the first round last year at guard, had a really nice rookie season. George Fant actually had a good year at offensive tackle too last year. They got guys like CJ Uzoma over from Cincinnati to play tight end. Tyler Conklin, who's a pretty nice number 2 tight end, coming over from Minnesota. I like a lot of what the Jets did, man. Obviously, like there's still question marks on this roster. It's not ready to win a Super Bowl, obviously, but I think they can compete. I think they're going to be a competitive football team. Maybe not a playoff team, obviously, this year, but like they're going to be a better team, I think. So I'm cautiously optimistic for the Jets. Who's your pick for this category?
My pick is the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, getting Matt Ryan to be on that team is going to be the best quarterback they've seen since Andrew Luck, left. So for me, the Phillip Rivers experiment didn't work. Carson Wentz didn't work. So all that was just like, oh man, and they've had a lot of talent on this team that has just not been able to be taken advantage of because of the quarterback situation. I know Matt Ryan is not everybody's cup of tea, but Matt Ryan on this offense with Pittman and now adding Alec Pierce and then having Paris Campbell, having the tight end, Ali Cox, I think him with Jonathan Taylor and Hines in the backfield makes this team so much better. And I really, that offensive line up front, obviously, I'm a big fan of what Dodds and what, Chris do there with that. That offensive line is one of my favorites in the league. And then the defense is stacked. It's just like, to me, I think they got a very stout defense. I think they're going to be tough to compete with. And adding Gilmore at corner, some people are like, well, he's kind of over the hill. He didn't do really well in Carolina. I think Carolina was an absolute shit show last year, and not anybody was really looking to win over there after week 5 because of everything that was coming out of there. So going to a team like this, a business-oriented team like Gilmore's used to from New England and stuff, I think you're going to see a different player this year, and he's going to really infuse himself, and his guidance and leadership is going to help this secondary. So for me, looking at the Colts which is no surprise, Ballard and Dodds, they've been putting good teams together, but putting Matt Ryan into play right now, I think really is going to fix their quarterback position as long as they stay healthy. And with that offensive line and Jonathan Taylor, it's hard not to keep him healthy,
Yeah, no, I always root for the Colts a little bit, because I like Frank Reich, the head coach, and I've always liked Chris Ballard. He's been one of the better general managers in the NFL. So rooting for them. David, I want to get last thing. I know we're moving fast here, but I want to talk a little NIL, David. I want to talk to you about what happened to me this morning. Are you ready for this conversation? So there is an FCS tight end that is heading back to school for next year, right?
Yeah.
He is a really talented player. I'm not going to use his name because he dropped a little information on me, and that interview is going to be made public here pretty soon. So tight end, he's going to be a redshirt junior, and he's already playing on, he had a great All-American season last year. I think he's the best tight end to come out of FCS since Dallas Goedert. Like, I think he's a really good football player, draftable player.
He's a really good football player, but go ahead.
I mean, he had over 800 yards last year as a tight end in the NFL, so he's a pretty good player.
Receiver.
That's fine. He's one of the better blocking tight ends in the NFL, but that's a different conversation for I mean, that's how he grades out. But yeah, anyway, all right, cool. So anyway, there's this really good tight end out of FCS, David. Really good player. He was talking to me about his offseason, and he was telling me that there were FBS programs that were hitting him up, pretty good FBS programs, and offering him 6 figures. So I'm like, in the NIL deals, right? I'm like, oh, wow, that's crazy. I was like, oh, when did you enter the transfer portal? He's like, oh, no, I never entered the transfer portal. So that means that there were schools reaching out to him and offering him NIL deals to enter the transfer portal.
Right.
Which, one, if it's coaches, that's tampering. Just flat out. But the thing that a lot of these programs are doing now is they're making collectives, which are just boosters, right? And that's like a third-party thing, right? So they can't get in trouble. But either way, it's tampering, no matter how you look at it. So that happened this morning. I'm like, shit, man, that's crazy. Then you know what else David today broke? Wide receiver from Texas, Xavier Worthy, good player, by the way, excuse me, was a freshman last year, NFL kid all day. Like in a couple years, he was their best receiver as a freshman last year at Texas. So Xavier Worthy basically said that the same thing happened to him. Teams reached out to him and offered him 7 figures of NIL deals And again, he never entered the transfer portal. So we're about to hit a little part here, David, where players are now getting enticed to enter the transfer portal, not even to come out of the transfer portal to a team, to enter the transfer portal. And I'm here to ask, what the F is the NCAA doing? What are we doing? Are we not going to police any of this, man? Is this about to happen? I've already said, quoted on this podcast, that the right now the NIL stuff, right? And I'm all in favor of players making money off their name, image, and likeness. I don't want that to be kind of
That's part of my company model where you help them out doing it.
I have
All
been
for
for
it.
this as a former college athlete, not at a high level. I am 100% for this, and I always have been for a long time. But we're about to turn the Wild West, which is what it is right now in the NIL world, because there's no regulations on anything, there's no policing on everything, and we're about to set this place on fire, sir. It is about to get flamed up because there's no way to control how far people can go with this right now. They can't prove that these coaches are offering anything. They have collectives now. They have third parties. Where is the line?
They have lobbyists. They're setting up lobbyist firms. They're setting up lobbyists.
They are. Well, my question though is, and it's all associated with the transfer portal stuff too, because now there's the whole thing of like, they set it aside so like your first transfer is now free. So what people are going to do now, what players are going to do eventually, is they're going to get money to go to a school, and then they're going to transfer to another school and get even more money, and they're not going to have to sit a year or anything. Like there's no repercussions. And I don't blame the players because, like, I would probably manipulate the system as well if I could manipulate the system. My question is, where's the line? And what the hell is the NCAA doing? What are we doing? What I don't understand. I understand.
I'll answer that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What are they doing? Nothing yet. Because
are they ever going to do something? That's my real question.
Yes, they will. When it hits a big program and it's a big time player or two, then it will matter. Seeing Texas didn't have a player drafted this year, they could care less what happens to Texas and Steve Sarkisian. Plus, Texas is the wealthiest program in sports. So, for them, they're like, well, it's not like they went and took Bryce Hall away from Alabama. Okay? When you get a Bryce Hall leaving Alabama to go to Clemson.
Bryce Young.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're good.
Sorry, Bryce Young.
We talk about Bryce Hall a lot. That's my fault. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's my fault. I should know this example better. But when you have Bryce Young leaving Alabama to go to Clemson, and it's his free transfer, and now Clemson's going to win the national title and Alabama's not, that's when the NCAA is going to step in and launch an investigation, and there's going to be all sorts of, looking into things. They don't care what happens at little programs. They don't care what happens in moms and pop stores. They don't care when it interferes with anybody else. They really don't, because it won't mess up the ratings. It's all about the ratings. And what do they want? They want Alabama playing somebody in the national title game so the ratings is always high. That's all they care about. That's 100% all they want. They want the top end to be fed, and they don't care about the rules being broken underneath that. Now, a guy like Worthy, I love Worthy. Skinny kid, got to fill out a little bit, but really good player, like you said. And he's a guy that definitely is an NFL prospect. If next year Texas doesn't deliver a team for him, and he's a sophomore going into his junior year, and that's going to be a one and done somewhere, you could see a Worthy leave Texas to go to Alabama or somewhere that has the next hot quarterback prospect. And boom, put him in, and he makes a ton of money. I mean, look what we saw with Walker this year going to Michigan State. Look at what we saw with Williams leaving Ohio State, going to Alabama, and now he was a first-round draft choice, whereas the other two kids from Ohio State were in front of him. They got drafted in front of him. They actually went 1, 2, 3. They went
11, 12, yeah.
Wilson, and then him. So, again, you can see that happening big time coming up if they don't put regulations in.
But
now,
it's already
but again, the regulations that need to be set, right?
Yeah.
Is transparency.
Right.
If you have NIL deals, everybody that's talking to anybody needs to have a transparent record of communications going forward. So if I have a conglomerate for Alabama, Michigan, Michigan State, whatever, and I'm that conglomerate, my records are now open to the NC2A to make sure that I'm not recruiting for anybody. I'm only talking to the players that are legally under contract with my conglomerate to do that. And if that player is a single entity like a Worthy working with your conglomerate, you still cannot communicate to him about the teams inside your conglomerate in order to keep that essence of impropriety out of the building. So, again, if a Worthy is your single client, you don't have the whole team of Texas, you just have Worthy and you're working with him, but you got 5 other regular teams like Michigan, Michigan State, Texas, Alabama, whatever, or not Texas, Texas Tech and Alabama. You can't talk to Worthy about any of those other teams. If you got a text, if you got an email, if you got a, written piece of papers in a file cabinet somewhere in Mar-a-Lago, you cannot talk to them about any of the people that you work with. That's part of the contract, right? Because if they don't go that deep with the communication, people are just going to do it, and they'll do it brazenly.
Yep.
And what are you going to do about it? NC2A is not one to really screw up or mess with. The 5 power conferences want to govern themselves anyways. They're tired of the NC2A.
I'm struggling with it so much, man, because I want to believe that the NCAA is going to step in at some point and do something. And I do believe eventually their hand will be forced. But David, you mentioned like when that happened. Well, it's already kind of happening, man. Caleb Williams was a freshman All-American, 5-star quarterback. He started at Oklahoma and forced Spencer Rattler out of the program. And then he goes and he transfers to USC with Lincoln Riley and takes millions to an NIL kind of conversation. So it's already happening, man. It's already
but here's
happening.
The thing with that move. He went to get coached by Lincoln, and then Lincoln left.
You think that's why he left? I don't know if that's 100% why he left.
Well, again, we all know there's backroom deals all the time, right?
Sure.
But he did go to get coached by Lincoln, and then Lincoln left to go to SC, so the kid followed him. Just like the Fresno State quarterback and Fresno State receiver, their coach got the Washington or Washington State job, and they both transferred up there. Well,
actually, the quarterback ended up going back to Fresno State. He was about to transfer there, and then he went back. Yeah, Haener. Yeah, Jake Haener.
Yeah. So again, it was a situation where people like to follow their coaches. Yep. It's been that way forever in football, in basketball. People transfer around for that. I don't fault them for that. Like if you go somewhere where your coach is, and you go, I want to be coached by him. I happen to make some money doing it. Cool. I don't care about that. What I care about is the outright blazing. There's no penalty for transferring now. So if you get a player who's like, say, a stellar linebacker out of Tennessee or something, and Alabama needs a linebacker, they can brazenly just go, okay, come here. Our NIL deals are better.
Well, that's it. I guess maybe it's because I work obviously on the recruiting side of stuff so much. And I just see this conversation so much, man. And it's real. There was literally a recruit that is going to University of Tennessee next year. You just use Tennessee as an example. $8 million, NIL deal for this kid to sign to Tennessee, man. Just like ridiculous.
What kind of player is this? A quarterback that got?
He's a 5-star quarterback. Yeah, I mean it's $8 million dispersed over 4 years, but like that's still $2 million a year for a high school kid. Yeah. So
yeah, that's still a huge windfall. I don't know what the NIL deal encompasses, but that's ridiculous.
I don't know either. But
But I thought they started being ridiculous last year, and this. I know we're a bit long, but last year when BYU smartly utilized the rules to get all their kids that are walk-ons scholarship money from a local bed company or something like that. Yeah. They took the check from them and they gave it to all the players that weren't getting scholarships and gave it to them. I'm like, that's a genius and creative way to get kids that deserve to get their college paid for. But when I saw that, I'm like, that opens up the hole for so much more, because people now will take the creativity and apply it forward. When they saw what this just happened, they'll be like, we can use it for this. We can use it for it. And again, I'll never forget, Al Davis taught me a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
So when the AFL and NFL were separate entities, they had an agreement not to really sign each other's players.
Right.
Don't go after their players. That was it. It's like, listen, you go get your own players. Once they're in the AFL or once they're in the NFL, they're in your league. We're not touching them.
Mm-hmm.
There was a punter.
Oh yeah, I know. I know this. Gogolak? No.
There was a punter that the NFL took.
What was his name? I know his name. Was it Gogolak? No.
It wasn't Gogolak, but
it was something like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was something like that, but that's not it. And so then Al Davis looked at his partners and said, boys, they just messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go. And they went and signed 3 NFL quarterbacks to AFL teams. And the NFL, that forced the merger into what we know now as the NFL with AFC and NFC, because they started signing the quarterback talent away from the NFL, right?
Mm-hmm.
Once quarterback talent starts getting affected in Alabama and big schools like that, you will see the NCAA move forward. Until that happens, you will not see them, in my opinion, get involved any way, shape, or form, because they don't want the court battles. They would rather the schools deal with it on a kid level and a tampering level and try to prove tampering charges. And when they're unproven, unfounded, they're not going to worry about a receiver, a running back, a lineman. They're going to only worry about when quarterbacks start getting affected.
I'm not disagreeing with that fact. All I'll say this, because we do have to end the show here, unfortunately. I think we're going to go deeper into the transfer portal next week in the NIL
we
stuff.
Definitely go deeper into it. And us, we could sit here for 4 hours talking about it.
Yeah, all I'll say to finish this is I love NIL and the possibilities for players making money. The transfer portal, I don't like what it's become, but I like the idea of it. I feel if you police it better, there could be a good potential there. I really do. As far as the NCAA's involvement, man, I'm just so disappointed that we're at this point and nothing's happening. I really am. I hate that it's just become such a reactionary thing comparative to a proactive thing, right? Like I want someone to be like, this is going to be a problem. We see kind of, have some foresight to it. And like, let's act now instead of waiting until the shit hits the fan and then we have to react because our back's against the wall, right? That's my whole thing. So this is Mavs Sports Take episode 84. We went a few minutes over for you all. So if you could, please like, share, subscribe, give us a rating and a review on your favorite podcast platform. We thank you all so much. Ryan Roberts and David Turner signing off this week. We'll be back to talk the inner workings of sports world next week. Thank you all.